Okay, Plato Part III. So we had investigated this relationship between the realm of the physical, the realm of the forms, and insofar as how we explain and how we understand our currently ever-changing, imperfect world, as we understand it in terms of the perfect realm of the forms. That for everything existing in our world, how it is that we understand meaning, essence, identity, as we understand it in terms of the participation in the forms. Now, returning to his meta-ethical question, okay, is there some sort of objective property or objective understanding of the good? Okay. Plato thinks yes. He thinks that there is a way to understand the good, and it kind of follows the same program as we understand this notion of the ideal or the perfect. That if we think about it, and we think about, okay, what does it mean to be human? That we all probably have some sort of version of the ideal human, and just almost it seems pretty non-contentious that in corresponding with this notion of the ideal, there's also this idea of the good. For instance, right, that the way that how am I able to claim that this is a good red water bottle? Okay, it's a good red water bottle because one, it's participating in the form of redness, the form of water bottleness, whatever that may be, but also, like, is there something that gives those forms meaning? And Plato thinks yes, and so the way that he understands it is that there's like this ultimate form of what's called the good. And so we have this participation with the form of redness, the form of water bottleness, but those forms are participating in this form of goodness, right? Which kind of comes back down, and again, sounds weird. It's weird to unpack, but gives this form, gives this water bottle the ability to be claimed a good red water bottle. Is because it's participating not only in water bottleness, redness, excuse me, but it's also participating in the form of good. So the qualifiers of good red water bottle are only applied, or can only be, are applied because of this continual participation. Similarly, how do I know that I am a good human, right? Well, it's by trying to participate with the form of the good, with this overarching, perfect, kind of universal form that gives all the other forms meaning, which help give all of us meaning, and give our existences meaning in our day-to-day lives. Now, and for that, Plato thinks that, like, that is the objective notion of the good. For instance, right, if we were to say, well, what is it that, excuse me, might be travel. What is it when I say, all right, well, a good crepe, right? A good, how we define a good crepe, if you will, is it's light, right? It has to be light. But like a good paperweight is heavy. So is there any sort of, what is the connection that they both share? Well, they share the connection because they're both participating in the form of the good, in this overarching kind of perfect, universal, understanding form of the good. And as you can see on the back sheet here, we have good. I have good written up top and kind of like a pyramid here. So you have good, and then you can kind of skip over justice, math, logic, etc. But you have good, and then you have the object types of like the water bottle, human, etc. Right? And even those objects which haven't been invented, right? They still have a form. We just have yet to encounter it. We do this through discovery, experiments, and reasoning. Now, what's interesting here is even back in Plato's day, there was a form of computer. Right? It was just along the lines of human evolution, human intellectual development that we had yet to encounter, yet to participate with the form of computer. So now that we have engaged and tapped into the form of computer, now we're still trying to make the best type of computer, right? And we're continually pushing, continually investigating, and how that is referenced and how that is understood in Platonic terms is that we're trying to get closer to the ultimate form of computer, right? The ideal, the good computer. Okay. Now, let me just make sure here are my notes. Sorry. And you can see on the backside here where we talk a little bit about evil. And Plato doesn't deny that evil exists, right? I mean, evil exists in the world. But kind of on an intuitive level, when evil does exist, almost by definition, it's the absence of goodness, right? So there can't be, under Platonic terms, like a good murder. Because ultimately, this idea of evil, this idea of the absence of goodness, is just void. It still exists because we live in an imperfect physical world. Right? But there's not going to be a form existing for murder. There's not going to be a form existing for rape or for these really heinous crimes, because ultimately you can't understand those in terms of goodness. Okay? And Plato doesn't talk too much about it, but that's kind of the understanding. Now, all right, if all of this sounds crazy, which arguably it might. Okay. If all of this sounds crazy, I had this very patriotic notepad from my parents, so this will be helpful. If all of this sounds crazy, right, where we have the realm of the physical down here. I know it's backwards. I don't want to write left-handed, sorry. And we have the realm of the forms up here, right? And if here's a tree, right? And that's participating in treeness, okay? And it's kind of coming back down to give this tree meaning, along with all other trees of various shapes, colors, and sizes, right? Now, moreover, not only do we have that distinction, right, but we have kind of this realm of the physical, realm of the forms, and we have this overarching form of the good, okay, which helps kind of give everything meaning. Now, if everything we've talked about today in those two previous lectures sounds crazy, which arguably it might, let me make one little change here and see if it becomes a little bit more clear. Let's just take out an O. So now we have God. Perhaps, I would argue, everything we've just talked about with regards to the theory of the forms might now make a lot more sense. And the reason for this is that Plato was heavily adopted. Platonic thought, Platonic philosophy was heavily developed and implemented into Christian theology. Plato existed 2,000 something years before the birth of Christianity. Okay? And this idea of the theory of the forms, this idea of the two layers, was especially picked up on by the great theologian St. Augustine. Okay? And St. Augustine wrote about two cities, the city of man and the city of God. And if we think about how we understand this term of the good, right? Put it in kind of Christian language, if you will, right? We have heaven. Or Christians have heaven, rather. Right? This perfect, eternal, unchanging, place of the Almighty. We have our world of the physical, our world that's sinful, right? That's the phrase that's used in Christian theology. Sinful, right? That it's changing, it's evil, there are bad things that happen. But how do we understand ourselves? How do we understand, perhaps under that Christian framework, how do we understand our world around us, well, it's temporary, right? That we're just living this kind of temporary physical existence, waiting for what's better, waiting for what's more to come, which what's more to come is this eternal, unchanging realm of heaven. Moreover, how do we understand meaning in our physical, challenging existence? Well, under the Christian perspective, right, it's understood with relationship to God. It's understood with relationship to this realm, right? It's understood with relationship to heaven. And so, if this conception is, even if you don't buy into it, even if you are a religious, right? Perhaps this conception makes a little bit more sense, right? That if we think about things in Plato's terms, the realm of the forms, the realm of the physical, well, if we just change those ever so slightly, instead of the form of the good, we have God, right? Wherever God exists, right? We have God that gives everything meaning. Similarly, under Plato's thought, we have good, which gives everything meaning. And perhaps if we start thinking about kind of what Plato's trying to say in those terms, a lot of these questions might become a little bit more clear, given perhaps a variety of our backgrounds, especially in the West. Right? And I think that's a really kind of interesting, hopeful, powerful connection here. That if everything we've talked about seems crazy, but yet you believe in heaven, kind of have Plato to thank for that. Tomorrow we'll investigate one of, I think, the most powerful stories in Western philosophy and perhaps in Western literature. We'll discuss the allegory of the cave, and we'll see very clearly how it relates to what it is has just been said with regards to the theory of the forms. And I think that we'll find it particularly invigorating. Thank you so much. It's my parents' dog, Frank, who just barked, if you heard it. Thanks.